Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of JKL Media, where three friends pick random movies, TV shows, plays, musicals, who knows what we're going to talk about. And we are all here singing Kumbaya together after a very rough week. So we decided to go back in time and discuss a 1939 American Western many people consider a classic, John Ford's Stagecoach. I am Jesse Jackson. I guess I'm riding shotgun, maybe?
Ooh.
Yes.
Uh,
I have Karen. Hey, Karen.
hello.
And Lou.
Howdy, folks.
And if I remember correctly, Karen has seen this film before, but you had
A
not,
lot.
correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Stagecoach is a 1939 film. It is directed by John Ford, who many consider one of the greatest American directors of all time. It is considered by many as one of the first adult westerns, a western that carried a lot more themes. Many people believe that it's the first disaster film because the idea of modern disaster films where a bunch of people get together and bad things happen, like in The Towering Inferno or The Poseidon Adventure. I think it is a really wonderful film that tells a significant story with a lot of different characters. There certainly is, based on the time frame, some problems with some of the duplication, yeah, how they show certain characters, but I can't wait to hear first thoughts. You said, Lou, you'd never seen it before. Give me your initial thoughts of the film.
It's a time capsule of the era in which it was created, both from a story and technological standpoint. I gotta admit, I found it hard work to get through it. There's a lot of scenes of the stagecoach or horses just going across landscapes, which gets old really fast. But I take that in hand. That's part of the era because even stuff like that in 60, if you watch 60s TV shows, they show lots of shots of people driving from one location to the other and just playing music. So that obviously was borrowed heavily from this movie. Thankfully, we don't see as much today. We just cut from one spot to another, get on with the story. So there's a lot of filler in this movie. I think that if it had been filmed in color, it would probably stand up better than the black and white because John Ford is, of course, famous for filming these gorgeous landscapes and that. But with the,
Yeah,
at least the version I saw, it was pretty underwhelming because it wasn't very clear and it was all in black and white. So it was, yeah, I've seen one rock, I've seen a dozen five.
and by the way, it's Monument Valley, which
Yeah,
is considered that was he went there
that was his
often
playground. Yeah.
filming.
So from that aspect, it was really tough to get through. And on the other hand, the greatest appeal was seeing a bunch of actors that I'm familiar with, but I've never seen them as this young. So like
Mhm.
to see Andy Devine, who I'm pretty sure was in Roy Rogers, right?
Yeah.
He was a sidekick,
Mhm.
I believe in that. He's got that very distinctive, cracky voice. So he was my favorite character, actually, and maybe the Doctor second. But to see like John Carradine, I didn't even recognize him.
Mm,
I
right?
thought, who's that guy? He looks familiar, but I cannot place him. So to see him was interesting. And then, of course, the other actors are more character actors in that. But to see them all so young, and especially like John Wayne, he doesn't have quite the drawl that he has in
Mhm.
later movies. So I appreciated that. And this the movie has the stereotype characters that we've come to know in so many other movies, like the doctor with the drinking problem, the conflicted character who's got John Wayne's character who's got a backstory with his brother, his family being murdered, the prostitute with the heart of gold, the snobby lady, the timid businessman, I guess you could say. And yeah, so these are stereotypes that we've seen in so many other movies that have come after it that from a storytelling point of view, I can appreciate that from a film history point of view. But overall, this was a tough slog for me.
Oh, okay, interesting. All right, I'll have some thoughts, but Karen, let's hear yours.
Yeah, I watched it twice because we took a week off
Right.
and I wanted to refresh myself. I actually found it easier to watch it the second time, but I agree with Lou. And I think, and color was a thing at this point because it was the same time that The Wizard of Oz was filmed.
Mhm.
So it really did the movie a disservice because that part of the country is gorgeous. Monument Valley is one of the most awe-inspiring landscapes. New Mexico and Arizona are just amazing. I was just transfixed by it. And I think seeing it in black and white does nothing for the landscape. I do agree that there is a lot of historical significance that this movie has, that it definitely has a place in film history. It was John Wayne's first movie
First
and
starring role.
first
Yes.
starring role, sorry, like a leading man. And this is essentially what launched his career. So in that case, it also is significant. I agree with Lou. I think him not having his vocal and the way he walked and not having his trademark conveyances, I think I enjoyed him more because he was
Mhm.
just talking like a regular person instead of that thing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of problematic things with this movie for me. And I did want to ask you both, have you ever ridden in a stagecoach? Either of you?
No.
No, but that was the
No?
smoothest riding stagecoach I've ever seen.
I have ridden in a stagecoach several times. Ghost towns are a big thing in California. And if you go anywhere near a ghost town on a vacation with your family, they're going to turn off the highway. That's just how it was. And so we would go to this place. I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, it's a very popular ghost town. We would get sarsaparilla and it was crazy. And they had this thing where you could ride a stagecoach and you'd get ambushed halfway through the ride. And it was a fun thing that you do. They are not pleasant to ride in. There are no shock absorbers.
Yeah.
They don't fit 8 people, no matter what.
Yeah.
It's just, they definitely had something built.
Sure.
So to me, I was like, okay, that's not how a stagecoach works. It's for a movie. I understand that. And also, I come from the Wild West, and that was a big part of growing up. There were a lot of things in this that I thought, that's not how it is. There's nothing about this that, that hits me as realistic. But again, it's a study in film, I think. And so that's my view on it.
Yeah. So a couple of just the facts. This was based on a short story. I read the short story last night. I did not
Mm,
find it that good of a short story.
no.
I don't quite, they did a lot of different change on it. This was the film that made John Wayne a star. That is a iconic scene of him flipping the rifle, and
Yeah.
doing that is one of the best historically introductions to a character. Orson Welles says it was a perfect textbook of filming, and he watched it 40 times as he was preparing to do Citizen Kane.
Okay, that makes
Uh,
sense.
it is, I think you mentioned it really well, Lou, that these characters are now tropes, but at the time they weren't
Yeah.
necessarily. John Ford was nominated for Best Director. It's the only time he was nominated that he didn't win. Thomas Mitchell won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. He's the one who plays the doctor. And the score won, which I do think the musical score is absolutely beautiful on this. This is one of my favorite films, and I felt the hypocrisy of when I'm talking to Charles about Classic Who episodes, I'm like, enough with, we need to change the pacing. Come on. And as I was watching this film, I went, if I was not a fan, I would be feeling the same way.
Right.
How often do we drive by the same scene? How many more scenes do we need to see? You made me laugh, Lou, because I remember a guy on some podcast talked about he was watching Barnaby Jones, and he said we saw the car pull up. Barnaby gets out of the car. He walks up the sidewalk, gets to the door, and rings it with no dialogue, right? And he's like, no way we'd have this. You now may have two people having dialogue to move the plot along as they walk to the door, but
Yep.
never that scene. So I absolutely agree with the pacing. I think I love the film
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
didn't expect it.
Mine,
Yeah.
yeah, that reminded me, those scenes remind me of watching Mannix or the Rockford Files or something like
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
And they
Yeah.
use it for exposition a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
I
then
did,
sometimes
yeah, go
it's
ahead.
just some guy looking at the camera. The banker, it
Yeah.
lingered on him for 10 seconds. And I thought,
Yeah.
what? What does
Yeah.
that have to do with anything?
Karen, is there of the characters that you guys have talked, you've already talked about the driver, Buck is and Andy Devine is a well-known character actor. Any other characters that stand out to you?
Sure, Curly,
Hmm.
the sheriff.
Hmm.
I thought that was an effective role. And it
Yes.
showed that back then there was definitely shades of gray in the law.
Yeah.
And him and the driver, their relationship, I
Yeah.
thought was good too.
And I do think it's interesting. They don't tell what Ringo was in the penitentiary.
Uh,
Yeah.
right.
So it seemed like he had was trying to kill, avenging his family, right? All right.
And I like Dallas too.
Yes, I did too. I thought the hooker with the heart of gold,
Yeah.
the implication that they can't say what she is
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's 39, but they imply pretty well.
Yeah.
And the Ringo, totally oblivious to, he thinks everyone is shunning him because he's someone who's broken out of jail, has no clue that she's this
Do,
quote
do you
unquote
think that's
fallen
what
woman.
happened? Or do you think he was just doing
Didn't
it to
care.
make her feel better?
I think he did not know till the end
Okay.
when they walk by and then she sees the defiance. Yes, this is where I'm at. This is what I am. And he doesn't care. At the end, he says, I asked you a question, right? It is the very much the we've only known each other a couple of days and now
Yeah.
I'm gonna go and get married.
See, there is a
Yeah,
viewpoint, and I lean towards this
yeah,
that he knew all along that
okay.
she was a hooker. And when they sat down at the table and people moved, he was trying to make her feel better by saying that they shunned
Ooh,
him. And he asked her to marry him in order to save her from that life. So that was where I was leaning.
both.
Yeah, that was actually it.
Yeah,
They leave it pretty
yeah,
ambiguous. They never tell you whether he
mhm,
knows or not.
yeah.
So,
I do agree. Claire Trevor is the one who played Dallas. I think she's really good. They will do two more films together, her and John Wayne. I think they had great chemistry.
good actress too.
How about you, Luke? Any characters that stand out from you?
Andy Devine, because of his voice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's just a very likable. He has a very
yeah,
likable vibe about him. I thought is the doctor? Is that Thomas Mitchell as Doc Boone?
yes.
I thought even though he was a very stereotyped character, I still think the actor did a great job with the role, and I quite enjoyed his portrayal, him sobering up with the coffee.
Yeah, more.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
But he had very great philosophical insights. I didn't understand why he was run out of the original town. Was it for something that he didn't
I
Because he was,
assume that's
cure
what it was.
somebody
yeah,
because of
because
his
he was a
drinking?
Yeah.
Or
drunk. Yeah.
I didn't understand why this one particular hooker was being kicked out of the town. What about all the other ones? Like, why was she the one that was singled out? I don't understand that.
Left with one of their husbands.
Maybe.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
I like the timid
The
whiskey
drummer.
sales. I thought he was good. But outside of that, John Wayne didn't really impress me. He's got that saddled with that hero role that Mark Hamill had with Luke
Hmm.
Skywalker. He's the least interesting character, really, in the Star Wars movies, except especially the first one. Once he finds out that Darth Vader, spoiler, is his father, then
Yeah.
he becomes a much more interesting character. Yeah, John Wayne's character is a pretty straightforward hero, and he doesn't really have an arc of any type. He doesn't change. He's got a mission to do that he wants to do, and he does it. He likes the girl, doesn't care what her history is, so he doesn't have any growth there. I just found him a very boring character, to be
Okay.
honest. Out of at least the other characters, even though their attributes from, yeah, by today's standards, you could say are overblown, but at least they had something interesting to watch. Whereas his character was all just spoken backstory. If we would have seen his family being killed, when I realized that's outside the scope of this movie, but that's where I wanted to see where his character was. And like Karen asked, why was he in jail? So his character was the only one that everything we knew about him, we were told, we weren't shown. Whereas all the other characters, we were shown. And that makes a big difference.
We didn't
Okay.
even see the shootout at the end,
No.
He cheated
Which-
too. He dove.
right? It
So,
was 3-on-1.
Connor's rifleman was
3-on-1,
gonna,
yes.
rifle around, and but he just dove.
He had 3 bullets.
They didn't even
Mhm.
show if the guys hit the ground. Like, okay.
Yeah.
They just cut the black there. How many bullets do those guns hold? Because they just kept shooting at the Indians.
They were reloading, right?
I didn't
then
see
they
much
said-
reloading.
Well, they would go click, and then they would go back in, and so you would
Yeah.
assume that they
Yeah.
were reloading at that point.
I assume.
But-
Still,
yeah, that Indian scene, besides the issues with the portrayals, that was just not believable at all. That
Right.
many Indians swarming
Yeah.
that stagecoach were not able to take it down. That was just like,
hmm
but it did have the cool, and I think this is what was done as a tribute in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the guy gets down between the horses and ladders his way down behind and then lets himself go out between the wagon wheels. And that was done very nicely in the Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark movie as well.
Yeah.
So again, there's that tribute to film history there.
And that was one of our feedback.
Mm.
Oh.
Neil Brass said, be sure to mention the stunt work of Yakima Canute, who had inspired the truck stunt in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So, yeah, he was the stunt coordinator. He's the one who came up with the idea that they would, because they were having trouble filming across the river, and he's the one that suggested, let's put hollow logs underneath it to give more buoyancy so
Mhm.
they could film it. And he is also the one that actually designed the stunt and did the stunt of going underneath that.
Highlight.
That was an homage in Raiders of the Lost Ark,
That's awesome.
which is pretty significant.
Sorry, Neil. Didn't mean to steal your thunder.
Yeah, but
You set him
especially
up.
what's really cool is you did not know that it was a direct homage.
Right.
And yeah, that's really cool. The other feedback we got, as my friend said, it's a good film, but it's incredibly racist.
Oh my,
So-
problematic because
Yeah.
it was back in the day,
Yes.
but to us, it's definitely
Yeah.
offensive in many ways.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that in a minute, but I did think that the Mrs. Mowry and the Confederate veteran, the professional gambler, right?
Yeah.
That
Mhm.
was an interesting because he admired her father so much.
Yeah.
And he was definitely he was the prodigal son that never came back, right?
Uh-oh.
Yeah. At the Dallas thing.
Yeah, Dallas, I love the idea that he has no respect for Dallas, but Mrs. Mowry, she has to drink from a silver cup and then he takes his cup back. The whole idea of they treat her as a second-class citizen, yet Dallas ends up being the hero when Mowry starts having the baby and the guys are all
Yep.
looking like, oh, what to do? She takes control, so helps to sober up the doctor, do that. I think that was an interesting arc where Mrs. Mowry at the end acknowledges that she stayed up all night taking care of the baby. She's done everything right. I liked that arc.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She
She
redeemed herself.
acknowledges it, but she knows that she'll never talk to her again.
Right.
How it is.
Yeah.
That is the way it is.
Classist too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Can I talk about the music? I know you brought it up.
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot of themes of songs that we know very well. At least I do. Bury Me Not on the Lone Prairie was a big
Yeah.
deal. I Dream of Jeannie with the light brown hair
Yeah.
was another one. And what was the other one? Oh, Shall We Gather at the River? And then I also want to mention Elvira Rios, who played
Yeah, the guy running the station, that's his wife, right?
Right.
Yeah. Oh,
she's a savage, yes?
he misses his horse.
Horse. I want my horse.
Right.
Yeah.
Terrible. But anyway,
Yes.
Elvira Rios was a very prominent singer Mexican singer back then. I love that she's Mexican and she plays an Indian in this movie, and she sings a Mexican song
Yes.
to people playing a Mexican tune. They're almost
Yeah.
like caballeros.
Yes.
I thought that was super weird, but the fact that and they're making all Indians into bad people, all of them, even her.
Yes.
She steals stuff and runs away.
And oh, he's Comanche. He hates the Apaches more than we do.
Her father, right? Except for
Yeah.
she deserts everybody in the end too and steals everything.
Yeah.
And the banker, again, a bad guy, and he panics when he sees that Yakima has stolen things. And of course, Mr. Coach Driver was using it as a pillow, all that money.
No.
He gets away with it.
Gets picked up.
This was after the crash, the depression, right?
Yeah.
So stealing money from the bank, that makes him a huge villain in this story, I'm assuming. The music was great. I thought those are all songs that I knew, definitely.
And I really love the score. I just think it's very uplifting and well done.
It's grand.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about, unfortunately, back then, Native Americans were not portrayed in the best light.
Oh my goodness.
There is a reason why, as kids, we played cowboys and Indians. Pardon the phrase, but it was, and then also the Mexican Americans, and that was this very slang English, and the idea about loving his horse
and
more
he was
than
an
his
idiot.
wife. Yes,
I
right.
mean, he was dumb, right? All Mexicans are lazy and dumb. That's a huge thing. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's what the movie portrays.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that, Karen? And then we'll go to you, Lou, about that.
Yeah, that bothers me a lot. Number one, we're the villains in that story.
Yes, we are.
We took their land. I have several relatives that were full-blooded Cherokee, so I do have some Cherokee. When I grew up, I learned a lot about that culture. It's very sad to me what we did to Native Americans, what we're still doing to Native Americans.
Yeah.
They deserve to be mad about that and to take it out on the new Americans. I just hate that they're vilified in this story at all. I hate it. And it was definitely the stereotypical, they're wearing the leather dress things and and at least they showed them having guns, because usually it would be all bows and arrows. A lot of them had guns, which is more realistic. There definitely was a conflict. So they're portraying the fact that there's a conflict, but they're making the Indians the villains, and that it grates. Definitely.
How about you, Lou?
This is a touchy thing for me because I fully appreciate and understand the sentiment that Karen expressed. As I said off the top, this movie is a time capsule. So it's a time capsule of the period in which it's made.
Right.
And so to a large degree, while I understand the objections being raised by the portrayal of certain races in this movie, I also think that when you come into something like this, you have to take that into account. And trying to apply modern day standards to something that was made almost 100 years ago is ridiculous to a certain degree. So I worry about, because I think, getting political, why not? Because we've been doing it all day. This is part of the pushback that politicians are getting from people because they're tired of that. There's the term woke, and I hate that term because I don't use it.
Me too.
But I can remember when Game of Thrones, a much more recent series, came on and everybody was complaining about the sex position. But then George Martin this is a fantasy world. This is the way things are in this world. So you stop trying to apply modern day standards to something that is fictional. If you don't like it, then just don't watch it, but don't get on a high horse and complain about it. I think this is part of the problem that people are so tired of, with a lot of other people telling them how to think and feel. And I think that we have to be careful about, or you have to be, I don't know how to say this without getting people upset, but you can't try to inflict your views on other people's entertainment. You have to say, okay, I don't agree with what this show is doing, but it's a free country, and if other people like it, then that's just the way it is. And so to try to inflict my viewpoint or your viewpoints on other people, I think is always a bad thing. Like one of the things that I just find totally ridiculous is there's been in recent years there's been outcries about, I think some woman wrote about a Mexican woman immigrating to the States and the trials and tribulations she faced trying to stay in the country, and then the people found out that she was white. And says, "Oh, you can't write about that experience. You're not of that culture." And I totally disagree with that. That's what the creative world is all about, creating worlds that you're not part and parcel of to tell a story. And so enforcing these views that only people of this race can only write about their race, that kind of stuff just really irritates me. And I think that's a lot of why you see people turning against conventional institutions, be it news organizations or political parties and so forth. And I think this is why we are where we at nowadays. People are trying to enforce their views on everybody else instead of just letting people tell their story. And if you like it, great. If you don't, that's okay. Just move on. Find something else
Yeah.
that you like instead of trying to tell other people what to like and not to like. So, in a way, this movie has given me the opportunity to talk about that. So I'm very thankful about that. And that
Okay.
just came off the spur of the moment based on what Karen was saying. And I totally respect both your opinions and everybody else's opinions out there. But this is just how I feel about censorship at large and trying to enforce morality on other groups.
Okay.
The stuff that people would complain about in this movie, frankly, I just can't really get that excited about it because I just look at it in a time capsule and say, yeah, this is where we were back then, and hopefully we're better off, we're better than we were today. But you have to wonder, don't you?
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I do have to say though, this was racist even then.
Are
Like
you
in
sure?
real life, this wasn't the story. And I understand that this is how stories were told back
You don't
then.
think in the 1930s people thought about Indians the way they did, and that they
I
were
think some
portrayed?
people did,
I think
but
a
Yeah.
in
lot of
real
people did.
life,
No, I think
it wasn't like that.
But
You know,
people thought like that.
and I think it feeds into each other too. They thought like that because of media and things like that telling them the story, including like newspapers and stuff, which
yeah.
in turn relates to more fiction being created that feeds into that, which also reinforces that opinion that they have. It feeds in. And again, I get it. And I totally respect anyone that this is not bothered by. I don't have anything against people that love this movie. I think also it was not a bad movie. That was just part of it from my perspective. But again, what I love about talking to you guys about stuff is that we don't always agree with each other.
Yeah.
I see from both of your points of view what you're saying, and I think we all respect each other for it. Yeah, so that's, I just wanted to
No, I
follow up with
really,
that.
yeah, no, I'm glad you guys did. I think that's interesting, as I think we talked about before, the idea that what bothers us and what doesn't, right? We're all very different.
We set aside and
What can
yeah,
we, what can we set aside? I've never been a big Woody Allen fan. I just didn't particularly like his movies. But after watching the documentary about the controversy with his stepdaughter, I'm like, how could you watch it? But then I adore Josh Whedon and I love Firefly. I want to give J.K. Rowling's grace because I love Harry Potter, even though she keeps doing more and more things that I go, this doesn't look good.
Neil Gaiman as an example.
I just recently saw that about him and I was like, oh no, not Neil.
Plus,
Um,
at the very least, he was a Scientologist. And
yeah,
I hate that whole thing. That's part of
yeah,
why I dislike Tom Cruise.
yeah,
So I tend to forgive it because of who he is, which
right.
I feel like a hypocrite, definitely. I hate the word woke too. I hate it.
Yeah, I do too.
Mhm.
Because there are
So yeah,
definitely things that I wave away because it
yeah,
suits me.
yeah. I love the idea that you guys did not love this movie. Often, like we're doing this, and I love the safe space of we all agree 12 Angry Men was absolutely something that was brilliantly written, something done. So to have something else that's a classic film. By the way, I almost did an audible, but Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is not available anywhere free. I
Mm,
almost said, hey, can we watch this and talk about that because of the election? But there wasn't a free streaming of it.
Wow.
for you.
Yeah, well, I've seen it multiple times. I just didn't want, I just thought,
I haven't seen it in a long time.
I will talk about, I was surprised by the ending the first time I watched the film. And I loved the happy ending. I loved, as you talked about, Karen, the grayness of the marshal. Talk about, I loved his father. I know he got a raw deal. And the doctor, that's almost the Casablanca end. Let me buy you a drink. Well, only one,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And I also love the scene where the doctor tells the guy, if you go out with that shotgun, I'll have you convicted of murder. I do think Thomas Mitchell is absolutely brilliant in this film, considering he also played Scarlett O'Hara's father in the
Mm.
same year, 1939.
Wow.
Okay.
Guy was
Um,
busy. I didn't
truly,
understand. I didn't understand that point about the shotgun. Like, what's the difference between a shotgun and a pistol?
so it's bringing a gun to a knife fight.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was a little
Is
confused. There were several points where I didn't understand the scene transitions. The one with a couple scenes with Ringo Kid and
Mhm,
Lucy, they're walking around town and
mhm,
they stop at one place and then she says something, then they go to another place and they stop there and I'm going like, what are these
mhm.
places? She doesn't live in this town. Why the one place, the brothel kind of made sense, but then the other place I'm going
Yeah,
like, why are you here?
Right.
she was going to the other side of the tracks.
Like,
1939, Thomas Mitchell was in Stagecoach, Only Angels Have Wing, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Smith Goes to Washington.
oh wow.
Yeah, yeah,
I should also mention that as a genre, westerns are my least favorite types of movies, unless they're anti-hero
right.
kind of ones. Those are the kind
Yeah.
I like. Once Upon a Time in the West, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, those movies, and of course Clint Eastwood's. I love High Plains Drifter and Pale Rider. I think, and his last one that won all the Academy Awards, which is The Unforgiven. Those
Yeah.
anti-westerns, but just a typical western as in and of itself is not one of my favorite types of
And I am a big John Ford, the man who shot Liberty Valance,
movies.
the
Just yeah.
the Searchers. I just am a big fan of it. I love the She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, the Calvary trilogy. So yeah, thank you guys for
I like
indulging me.
I like offbeat westerns, like
Yeah.
Silverado, I
Hmm.
think is amazing.
Yeah.
Blazing Saddles.
Blazing
Well,
Saddles was very funny. I
Blazing
love
Saddles.
Mel.
Talk about being of its time, but yes,
And
it is.
said earlier this week, where the white women at? And that's in a whole different context. But, and also I can't think of the name of the movie. I feel terrible. But the one with Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday and Kurt
Tombstone.
Russell is
Oh,
Tombstone.
Tombstone,
Thank you.
Yeah.
yes, yeah, that is an excellent movie. Yeah,
I
and
love
I
that
Yeah.
thought
movie.
I thought it was going to be some sort of Hatfield
Yeah.
and McCoy's
Right.
kind
And
of
McCoy
connection.
thing. And I think this is one of the earliest movies to portray PTSD because there
Oh,
were varying forms of PTSD. Could be a form of addictions in general
Right.
are
okay.
forms of PTSD. And
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was interesting to see that as well.
Yeah, and I also thought it was weird at the end when the sheriff let the kid and Lucy go. They never had a reaction shot from them. They stayed
Right.
on those two guys. So that was
Agreed.
All right. Any other thoughts before
Sorry we
tell people?
interrupted your.
That's good. Any other thoughts before we get out of here?
I'm glad it was only 90 minutes.
It is a short film.
Sorry,
Yes.
Jesse. I know you like it, but
Oh, that's okay.
it felt like
But
3 hours. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It was
All
tough to get
right.
through.
If someone wants to
Okay.
reach you, Lou, how can they?
You can find us on YouTube at Lou's Reviews, where you'll find our JKL Media podcast, where we've just done this episode, Stagecoach. We've also done a lot of TV shows, movies, music, comic books. We also have our flagship show, which is the Babylon 5, Last Best Hope podcast. And I also do some writer interviews and the occasional Stephen King podcast. On Twitter, you can find me at Lou W. Sitzma, Sytsma.
All right, Karen.
And I think we're going to do another Flanagan series next. Is that correct?
Absolutely, we all
Maybe think about the last name of a Nelly.
go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's Bly Manor, you guys.
Yes.
So that's what we're going to do next. But yeah, I really love that we talk about such different things, that we all have different viewpoints. I just love talking to you guys, period.
Yeah.
There's that. But where you can reach us for any JKL media production is jklb5podcast@gmail.com. And I am at Alaveria on various social media. And my blog is alliestuff.com.
I am at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter and Jesse Jackson on Facebook. We are continuing on Perfectly Good Podcast to count down every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order.
On.
We are an I.
Oh boy.
And we're continuing to have fun. Check that out along with my various other podcasts. We will be back in a few weeks to talk about something that will be pleasant for all of us. I'll leave that as a tease. For now, thank you, listeners. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Karen. Remember to be safe, be kind. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Here comes the cavalry.
The proceeding has been a JKL Media production.